Hey everybody, I'm Tracy.
And I'm Jay, and we want to welcome you to the Simply Holy Collective. We are a network of microchurches who are coming together to practice the way of Jesus. And so we're really grateful that you're even watching this and that there's people who are checking out the videos. So we really hope that it is helpful for you and encouraging for you. And we're just finding so much just joy and inspiration from getting together with the people that we gather with and talking about Jesus together and living life together. It's really been cool, and I hope that you're finding that same thing. We do want to remind you that on February the 25th, we're going to be having a gathering on that Sunday morning for anybody who wants to come together. We're going to have some worship. We're going to share a meal together. Just click on the RSVP in the email and let us know if you want to come. Anybody's welcome, and we would love to have you. So it may just be us, but there might be some other people that join us too. We don't know. We're not sure. Either way, we're really looking forward to that. And last week we were digging into the book of John, and we got into the first 5 verses, and we're just talking about the beginning of that prologue. And we're going to go a little bit further with that today, down through verse 18. And we're really excited just about all the things that we're learning through studying the Gospel of John and considering what John was communicating about Jesus and the way that he wrote his gospel and just thinking about who he was writing it to and why he was writing and the things that we can learn from the wisdom that John had gained and the perspective that he had gained in the long years of his life. So let's dig into that a little bit today. How I want to start today is by doing a practice, and we're going to put a practice at the very beginning. So if you can pull out your phone or a piece of paper, your journal or something like that, and I want you to take a few minutes and think about 5 words that describe God. And so when I ask you, how do you view God? When I say God, what comes to mind? What are 5 words that come to mind? So you can even pause the video and take a moment right now.
These aren't your Sunday school words, right?
No, yeah.
Try to be honest.
Yes, we're not looking for omnipresent and omniscient, but just the emotional connection words that come up for you when you think about God. So take a few minutes, write those down. And then, after you've done that, then we want you to write down 5 words that describe Jesus. And when we think about Jesus and who he is, what are 5 words that describe him? So take a minute, write those down. So now, as you look at those 2 lists, what do you notice? What are the differences that you see in the way that you describe God versus the way that you describe Jesus? For some of you, it may be exactly the same. For others, you may have a very different picture of God than you do of Jesus. So you've done this with a lot of people that you have studied the Bible with, and what's been your experience with this practice?
Yeah, so that's commonly how I start studying the Bible with people, is I have them write down 5 words for that, and then also the Holy Spirit and for the Bible. But something that I noticed about the differences between God and Jesus is that oftentimes people will say that God is maybe good, loving, those kinds of things, but also what will be in there could be angry, could be distant or confusing or vengeful even. There's these words that are angry, stuff like that. But then whenever I have people write down 5 words about Jesus, I have never had in all of my years anyone use any of those words to describe Jesus. Mm-hmm. They always use very connective, loving, grace-filled, merciful words. I don't know if that was your experience writing them down, but definitely there's a difference between the way that we perceive God and the way that we perceive Jesus.
Yeah. I think it's interesting to look at that. So, maybe have some discussion about that, and how what you discovered about your own. And we're going to kind of talk about that, our view of God and our view of Jesus, as we look at this first part of chapter 1 today. So
let's get into it. Let's start. We're going to start in verse 6. It says, "There was a man sent from God whose name was John. He came as a witness to testify concerning that light, so that through him all might believe. He himself was not the light. He came only as a witness to the light. So here we're introduced to John, who has been sent ahead of Jesus to point people in Jesus's direction. So he's kind of a reflector, I guess, is what it would be. So people were drawn to John, and he is reflecting that light, and he's saying, no, I'm not that light. Later on he's going to say he's not, but John is saying he's not. He was meant to simply point the people to Jesus.
But it's cool that, like, God... This is how God did it, is he was like, in preparation for Jesus to come, I'm going to send John to start having these conversations. And so you start seeing how God is trying to shake up people's ideas of what is happening and kind of wake up their spiritual imagination, in a sense, you know, because what is coming is really significant and really profound. And so it's not just like, then Jesus started preaching. It was like, no, we were setting the stage, and we're really getting things ready here.
It's almost like they're not ready for the truth.
Right.
You can't handle the truth.
You can't handle it yet. Yeah, we got to warm you up a little bit.
Prepare to hear the truth. You're not even ready.
So it goes on in verse 9, and it says, the true light that gives light to everyone was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Yet to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God. Children born not of natural descent, nor of human decision or a husband's will, but born of God. And so now we start to see, even here in chapter 1, John is, introducing this idea of being born of God, which we will obviously come to in chapter 3 and some of the later things. But he's starting to introduce this idea of those who believe in Jesus, and that's another theme that we see throughout the whole Gospel of John, that those who believe in Jesus get to become children of God and are born again into that family. So it's really cool how this prologue in chapter 1 is like setting up all of these deeper lessons that John is going to get into throughout the rest of the gospel, which I just think is so cool. But just this idea that there are those who will receive Jesus. There were those who responded and said yes. And to those who received him, they get the right to become children of God. There are some who don't. There are some, even as we see the story going on, there are some who didn't. One of the books I'm reading right now is called The Jewish Gospel of John, and it's a Messianic Jew who is writing about how so much it can be misinterpreted in John as being anti-Semitic, and that it's painting the Jews in a bad light. But we're going to see as we go along that there were definitely characters, the antagonist, the protagonist that John sets up, and you had those who were pushing against Jesus, where it talks about how he came to his own, but his own did not receive him, and it's not the Jews as every single Jewish person, but it's kind of a particular subset, and we're going to see that also develop as we go on. But so we're starting to see these themes coming together as we're reading through this prologue.
I just have to say that I love that this part just reminds me, because I can have that thing like, why doesn't everybody just believe?
Yeah.
I really do have this thing, and I want to say it's this completely benevolent thing where I want all men to be saved, but it's really not. I really just want everybody to agree with me. I really just want us all to, let's just all believe in God. Let's just all believe in Jesus. Why do we have to be persecuted? Why do we have to be made fun of? Why do we have to be marginalized? Why, all this. But this, right from the beginning, it just strikes me like I need to always remember, yes, there are some who do not understand. They do not receive him. They do not believe in Jesus. But I do. And there are many who do. I don't know, it just kind of helps me to relax. I get to be a child of God.
Yeah.
That is reward
Beautiful.
enough. Anyways.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's keep reading. In verse 14, it says, the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. in the beginning of this, the very first sentence, it says that he came and made his dwelling among us. And I love this because I'm a fan of Sukkot.
Right.
And if you're not, familiar with that, that's the third Jewish holiday of the year where all of the Jews would come together in Jerusalem to celebrate these three big holidays. And it's the last one. It's the biggest celebration, and it's the one where they all stay in tents, if you remember this.
Feast of Tabernacles.
It's the Feast of Tabernacles, yes.
Yeah.
So they all have these, tabernacles that they live in, these tents that they live in for the week, to remind them that God took care of them in the desert all those years that he took care of them.
Yeah.
And so now that same sort of sentiment is used here, saying that Jesus came to tabernacle among us. We get to dwell in his tent. We are dwelling in him. And one of the really cool things, a little bit of, like a fun fact, is that some people believe that Jesus's birth actually happened at Sukkot.
That's cool. That's a cool idea.
Perfect sense. I'm not saying that it was, but it does make sense.
It could make sense. Yes.
I like for it to be true.
Right.
So I just like that thought that Jesus came to dwell among us, and we get to be with him. And then this second part where it says that we have seen his glory. When I first read that, I don't know why, but it just reminded me of the story when Moses is talking to God, and he's kind of, bargaining a little bit with God. He's like, if you're not going to go with us, we don't want to go. I won't go without you. So there's this dialogue going on with God. And then at one point, Moses says, show me your glory, which I just feel is a very audacious thing to ask. Anyway, it just seems like really cool that he felt comfortable enough to say, show me your glory. And in that case, what happens is, if you remember the story, then God's like, well, you can't look at me, but I'm going to pass in front of you. You can see my back, kind of thing. But in Exodus 34:6, it says, and he passed in front of Moses proclaiming, the Lord, the compassionate and gracious God, slow to anger, abounding in love and faithfulness. He kind of goes on. But I have always been struck by this because I think about how out of all the things that God could have shown as his glory. I mean, he could have shown lightning and thunder, or he could have shown fire. He could have shown his power, could have shown his magnificence in some way. But when God shows his glory, he chooses to use the words compassionate and gracious. And that is an amazing thought. And now here we are in the New Testament, and Jesus is the glory of God.
Right.
And, Moses couldn't even look at God.
Yeah.
But we get to see God in the flesh. Jesus is the glory of God.
All right.
Isn't that an amazing thought? And the words used to describe are compassionate and gracious.
So Jesus' compassion and Jesus' grace, his love and his faithfulness, that is the glory of God. That's so cool. That's really cool.
In a person now that we can see.
Right.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So we have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. So it goes on in verse 15. It says, so John testified concerning him, and he cried out, saying, this is the one I spoke about when I said, he who comes after me has surpassed me because he was before me. So out of his fullness we have all received grace in place of grace already given. For the law was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. I love that phrase, that we received grace in place of grace already given. Just the idea that we've been given grace and then we get given more. That the coming of Jesus actually is grace on top of, in place of the grace that we've already been given. And, I love this, that the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. And now here's the thought, that the way that this is translated, the law, in the Jewish mind, what this meant was the Torah, the first 5 books of the Old Testament. That was given through Moses. it wasn't like, oh, it was just the law, and then we set up this false dichotomy between, well, the law was given through Moses and that was bad, but now we get grace and truth through Jesus and that is good. Mm-hmm. It's not like it was a bad good thing. Mm-hmm. And it's even, unfortunately, some translations have done that they wrote the law was given through Moses, but grace and truth came through Jesus Christ, which adds to that, I think a misunderstanding. I think a better reading of it and a better understanding of it is that the Torah was given through Moses. The beauty of God, the beauty of the story of God that we read in the Torah, that was given to us through Moses. The grace that we see of God wanting to bring about his people to be close with him and bring them back together with him and rescue them from all of these things that tend to enslave them and cause problems. That this grace that we see through the story in the Torah, like we have been given that, and that's beautiful. Mm-hmm. And now on top of that, we get this grace and truth and compassion and faithfulness that comes through Jesus being in the flesh so that we can see it and be able to, actually experience that. It's no longer, a God maybe who is up above and doing all these things, but it is a God who is making his dwelling with us, who is living together with us, that we can see this flesh and blood, and we can watch how he speaks, watch how he encounters people, watch how he deals with sin and conflict and disappointment and all these things. And through that, we get to experience this grace and truth of God through Jesus, which is so cool. And then that brings us then to verse 18, where it says, "No one has ever seen God, but the one and only Son, who is himself God, and is in closest relationship with the Father, has made him known." So it's by seeing Jesus that we know God. That takes us back to that N.T. Wright quote that we talked about last week, about how if you really want to understand God, then you look at Jesus. And it's just so beautiful that we can look at Jesus and understand who God is. The light that is coming into the world gives us this beautiful picture of our Heavenly Father.
Mm-hmm. And this is kind of a big deal.
Kind of.
Because, when you think about that, Jesus is the perfect representation of the heart of God. Mm-hmm. The heart of the Torah has always been grace. It's always been good. But there is a distinct difference. Like John is the one that gives us the story of the adulterous woman.
Right.
The woman caught in adultery. He's the one that gives us that story where this woman is brought before, and the Torah does say that she and her partner should be stoned to death. Mm-hmm. But Jesus pardons her. Mm-hmm. This is a very different outlook, or something for us to see, than what we picture from the God of the Old Testament. Mm-hmm. And that reminds me of the practice we did at the beginning.
Right.
I think ending up today, recalling the practice from the beginning, all of us have to sort of admit and grapple with the fact that we do have sort of a different image of God than we do of Jesus. Mm-hmm. Like we do. We have all this Old Testament reading, and that can bring a bit different feelings.
It's confusing.
Right? It can be confusing because maybe we didn't get the heart of that. But it is on us to realign our thinking in line with Jesus. Mm-hmm. Jesus is supposed to represent who God is. So maybe some of our views of God need to change so that we can realign them with who Jesus says that God is.
Right.
So a practice that you can do this week as you're praying at home together, whatever, is when you are praying, remind yourself of those 5 words that you wrote down for Jesus. And pray to God as those qualities. Even, say them out loud. God, I know that you are gracious. I know that you are kind. I know that you are whatever it is that you wrote down about Jesus. I know you are those things. And then speak to God as if you're speaking to those qualities that you see in Jesus, the words about Jesus. And see if that doesn't change how you talk to God.
That's great. Well, thanks for joining us for the Collective this week, and hope that this has been encouraging to you. Love you guys. We'll see you next week.